They should be sending it.
Well, welcome all to Qd Queensland. Good afternoon, my name is Brad Cooper, Group Managing Editor of Australian Community Media for the Northern Territory, Queensland region, publisher of Queensland Country Life, which has put on this wonderful event. We started in Toowoomba last month, and we're happy to come to Quilpie, and happy for you to host us here, so very appreciative of today's event. I'd also like to welcome those who are watching through queenslandcountrylife.com.au. As we live stream our discussion today, I encourage you to get on Twitter if you would mind switching your mobile phones to silent. And if I see you on your mobile phone fiddling around with it, I'll know that you're actually on Twitter. That's right, you're actually just chatting with friends using the hashtag #GrowQueensland sign there. So hashtag #GrowQueensland on Twitter, that way people can follow the conversation through the Twitter channel as well. So what is Qd Queensland? Well, that's most simple. It's a chance to shine a light on the vast opportunities in the state's rural and regional heartland, and in the process focus on its most valuable resource, its people. And this is where all of you can help through your ideas, your reflections, and your questions. So let's talk, and specifically, let's talk about the Southwest region. That's why we're here today. And to help us do this, we've got some fine people around the table, fine people in the audience as well. Of course, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions later. Before we get the ball rolling today, let's introduce our panel who have finally given up their time to participate in today's discussion. And I'll get you to hold your applause until the end, if you can, just so that we can keep things moving. You can see the name tags in front, but I might also get the panelists up just hold up their hand when I say their name so you know who they are, because I'm doing this in any particular order. Paul Holm is Queensland Livestock Manager for Elders. Paul has lived in Queensland for the past 10 years and travels extensively to some of our state's major beef centres from Longreach, Blackall, Roma and Toowoomba, and also Quilpie. He tells me he has a passion for bringing young staff into the agency business and paying them to have an adventure in the bush while they help to make their clients more profitable. Locke Douglas has had 26 years in rural and corporate banking, and during that time he has been involved in funding proposals for most sections of the food chain across Australia, from farm production through to food manufacturing and exporting. For a large part of his career, he's been working with global food and agribusiness specialist Rabobank, and this has given him an insight into global commodity markets, as well as an understanding of the production systems and capacities of Australia's major competitors in the food and agriculture sector. Locke is Rabobank's Southern Queensland Regional Manager, a role which brings responsibility for 5 branches located across across southern Queensland. Davida Melksham's Twitter description says, "Love my husband and family. I'm into volunteering my awesome community, remote and rural Australia, music, words and photography. Although a teacher by training, she has always gravitated towards jobs that are challenging and not often mainstream, including providing a family support service where her classroom covered parts of 2 states and 620,000 square kilometres. She's coordinating a national volunteer program from childhood with oversight for 1,300 volunteers and contracts for RFDS and Lifeline in the mental health field. She has a passion for the arts and our young people and hopes, she tells me, to be able to hold up her end with such an exceptionally capable panel. I'm sure you do well today, David. Stuart McKenzie needs little introduction in this part of the world. He is Quilpie Shire Mayor and Chair of the Outback Queensland Tourism Association. He is a member of the Darling Downs and South West Regional Development Australia Committee, which incorporates the 10 shires from Toowoomba West. He is also a member of the Rural Debt and Drought Task Force and an organic beef and wool producer. Dr. Adam Colso works at St George Hospital and provides inpatient care, emergency care, obstetrics and anaesthetics, as well as working in general practice in the community. A senior clinical lecturer with the University of Queensland, Dr. Colso is also a former president of the Rural Doctors Association of Queensland. He is currently the founding chair of the RDAQ Foundation, a health promotion charity focused on building healthier rural communities across Queensland. Tony Kosh joined Qld in July 2014 as the Client Liaison Officer for the Marinara in South West Queensland, bringing 20 years experience in economics, industry R&D, business planning and agribusiness banking. Prior to joining Qld, Tony worked in agribusiness consultancy, a commercial bank, and then the Queensland Department of Primary Industries. Stephen Tully has been a Quilpie District grazier for the past 27 years on Bungendera Station. He has been Quilpie AgForce President for 16 years and been on the AgForce Sheep and Wool Board, Wool Producers, Land Protection Council, Queensland Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, and currently AgForce Kangaroo Spokesperson and Quilpie Wild Dog Advisory Committee Chair. And lastly, but certainly not least, Councillor Lindsay Godfrey wears many hats: Pyru Mayor, South West Hospital and Health Board Chair, Chair of South West RED, Deputy Chair DDSW Council of Mayors, Chairman of Tinninburra Pastoral Company. He resides on the property 100 kilometres south of Cunnamulla, where he and his wife run a sheep and cattle operation. Lindsay has been involved in agribusiness politics for many years and is passionate about regionalism. He is well known among his peers as an accomplished economist. Good on you, Lindsay. Okay, please welcome our panel for today. Thank you. So, before we get started, just a couple of quick messages. Today's discussion will be structured around the 4 pillars of the Grow Queensland concept. And those 4 pillars are growing agriculture, growing our towns, growing our young people, growing the health and well-being of rural and regional Queenslanders. We aim to finish today at 5:30 p.m. and I will allow time for your questions about 30 minutes from the end. And before we fully begin this great sharing of ideas, I would like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, with elders past and present, on which this event and sharing of ideas and discussion takes place. So let's begin. And Stephen Tully, I think I'll start with you. You're a successful, great, you've built a successful business here. You've been here for 27 years. There certainly must be a lot of things that you like about the place. I'd like you to tell us in your own words what's so good about living in this part of the world.
I think the reason that we're still here and we like it is the independence that it gives you. It gives you the ability to rely on yourself and be what you make of it, I think is the biggest thing. And I suppose a lot of the things that I've been involved in and tried to do is to try and maintain that we have that ability to have some control over what we're doing and what we make of things. And I think out this way, it's very good at that. It's also a very good family environment, a fantastic place to bring up family. That doesn't mean to say that it's not lacking things and it's not, we couldn't make an improvement or a few things that we have access to. It could make that a hell of a lot better.
There's certainly a lot of things that aren't in your say that you've got some level of control, that you've got drought, you've got dogs, you read Queensland Country Life today, we've got the Country government that's also seems to be coming for you as well. You're certainly up against the budget.
Yeah, and look, all of those things you just mentioned it is what I've been involved in the fight for, and the climate is always going to be one that you can't do. But at the moment, we're involved in a cluster fence and putting up that fence, and that's to get rid of the kangaroo, or be able to reduce the impact and have control over the kangaroo impact and the dog impact, and that's primarily the reason that we're doing it. This emotionalism about trees is a big worry. As you know, I was very much involved in that fight with Mulga, and hopefully I did hear at one stage that memory that they've got they still remember the plot of harvesters very clearly, and hopefully they may not go near that one too much. But it's still very much an emotional event that they seem to go on with, and a very big worry for the future. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, Stuart McKenzie, beside Stephen there, I mean, you're heavily involved in trying to promote this area, and certainly now the tourism part as well. I mean, how would you sell the Southwest to the outside world? What's the story that the Southwest should be telling?
The first thing you've got to do is sell it, not sort of give off that really persona, I suppose. So certainly wherever I go, I do try and do that. And one of our biggest issues is getting the message out to people, especially for our east, that just have no idea of the opportunities here. And I mean, the services we do have and the lifestyle we do have, and just how, as Stephen said, bring up a family, it's one of the great stories. And I was involved last year in the showcase, regional showcase in Brisbane, where I had to present for the whole Southwest region. And the message that came overwhelming from city parents was that, wow, that would be such a great place to bring up children. I can see so many advantages there. I had no idea that you still had hospitals and all the basic services. So there is that great message to get out. And obviously from the tourism perspective, you've got to, you can't ever stand still. So you've always got to look at those opportunities.
And what are those opportunities specifically?
Oh, for tourism.
Not just tourism, but
but obviously in agriculture, and Steve, one of the great things that's happening in agriculture at the moment is exclusion fencing. I think that's we reached a position where we have to do something as landholders, and it's given us a chance. It's expensive, but it's given us a way forward. As a shire, we've actually made a commitment to exclusion fence the shire because of other reasons, but whether that happens or not. But we see that you can't stand still and say you've got a problem. There's no way out. There's always a way out. You just got to find that solution the best way and then go for it. And out here, you certainly always have. I always think there is always a solution, and that's the message I certainly take away.
So if we're talking about solutions and growing agriculture, Tony, beside you there, Stuart, you deal with landholders who want to get ahead and want to innovate and want a bit of a leg up. So how innovative are the graziers and farmers out this way? You know, what are you seeing on the land that they want to put their money into?
Yeah, well, that's obviously one of the good bits about my work is that I get to have a look inside a lot of really good businesses and discuss their ideas and those sorts of things. And obviously in this part of Queensland, Southwest Queensland, the exclusion fencing side of it, whether it's a couple of neighbours pairing up or a cluster arrangement or whatever, it's certainly one of the big ticket items that we're seeing come through from this area. Just a comment the other day, people with the exclusion fence said this is the first time in a long time we've had this much control of our business, and that's something that great to hear.
Maybe just down the other end of the table now, Paul from Elders, the guy who is constantly trying to attract young people in the agency business. I mean, workforce is a really important thing out here as well. I mean, how do you get young people to come out here and work, and what's the message you tell them about this place?
So, as part of the Elders, we have a trainee program. Spoke about it before. So they've just they've done an intake now. They had 236 applicants. 87 87 people got phone interviews, of which 22 of them were from Queensland. And so they'll put 10 staff on. They'll start in April, and 10 more that will start in October. So as part of that, they get to shift wherever the desire is. So we'll have people start in Roma, Emerald, Charters Towers, Darwin, Goulburn, Bairnsdale, Geraldton, and a couple of others, Narraport. So, and then they get shifted every 3 months. And in doing that, they get to learn the passion for the bush, I suppose. They get to see a lot of different things that if you grow up in Quilpie and get a job with elders and stay here, that's wonderful, but what do you bring? Where if you've grown up in Gippsland like I did, and have gone to Alice Springs, Narraport, Longreach, Blackwell, Roma, you bring a whole new collective to the table. So in doing that, we hope that Sam has done part of the trainee program, that he helped to build their passion for it. So, you know, a kid from Roma might never have come to Quilpie to work, but when they get out here, they might think this is a pretty good spot, and you can build longevity in the bush by that way.
And you get around plenty of these settings all the time. Tell us at the moment, what's your summary of what's happening in the beef garden and the sheep and wool garden as well? Is this life pretty good for these guys at the moment, or still very tough?
Still very patchy, I would say. The cattle market and the sheep market are still quite good. Brilliant, really. The cattle markets, particularly for the stores, has never been dearer. And the meat market, whilst it's come back a little bit, it's still quite strong. There's a big disparity between the price of meat and the price of cattle, but it's never really been that relevant. It's supply and demand. I mean, we'd like to see that sheep may restock back into here, and we passed to 3 trucks this morning that were heading for Junda. They've come out of the New England full of sheep, so there was 14 decks of sheep or something heading to Junda, to this side of Junda. So, I mean, hopefully that'll happen, and then everyone can get another swing back. But it's very patchy this in the last fortnight. I've been over a lot of Western Queensland, Quilpie to Aramac and around, and it's very patchy at best. Just very, very good to very, very bad.
So that's the local view. Maybe next year they're locked over, so might be able to provide us with a bit more of an overall picture of what's happening across the country and also some of their export markets as well.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, look, just before I jump onto that, just following up on what Stuart was saying earlier about the misunderstanding, I guess, between the city and the country. I think it's never been greater in terms of that there's not much appreciation of what happens west of the divide. And that's because we've come from an area or from a time where most people in the city have families from first cousins or something, and they go back up and visit another family. And I think that's a real issue we need to look at. One of the things and a small section, one of the things we're doing there is getting city kids who've never had any experience to it out visiting our clients, spending a couple of weeks with them. For the view they'll go back through their social media, will explain to their circle of friends what it's about. And it's in and itself won't do enough, but it's I think we somehow have to try and get that reconnection going. But just generally, I think we are in Australia, and this is a really general comment because the sectors that we're not this way, but we're a high cost producer, and that comes about because we have layers of regulation that we impose, and it's great because we say our food is safe and it's clean and it's green and all these things, but that comes at a cost. So we need consumers at the other end prepared to pay that cost. A lot of our competitors don't have those additional layers built into what they're doing. So for us to continue, we need to then look at how do we operate. And I think it's about continuing to strive, as we have for a lot of years, for productivity gains. So we're going to look at where the next productivity gains are coming from and see how we can enhance things like the cluster fencing or the perimeter fencing is a classic example. That's going to it's going to change the landscape in a lot of areas out here where roos and dogs have taken over, and we've seen an industry pretty much shut down by that. So that again will get production back in there. But I think also it's around technology, using technology. We don't know what's going to be in front of or what's available to us in 10 years' time. But it's coming at us pretty quickly, the changes in technology. We have to make sure we've got the infrastructure there to be able to have that communication where it should be, so that we're up amongst the leaders in all that sort of thing. And I think that's the challenge for us, because I'm not sure that what we're talking about now in communication will come in 10 years' time.
We've got the chairman of the Timber Pastoral Companies. I know you've wear many hats there, Councillor Godfrey, but I maybe you can just speak about your experience as a livestock producer as well. I mean, what are the major areas perhaps holding back this region, or some of the major areas that will take this region forward? We haven't yet really talked about transport, infrastructure. I mean, these are also areas that fall under the responsibility of local government as well, I would imagine. I mean, yourself and Stuart McKenzie are both blokes here with their clout, I would imagine, with some of our key decision makers. Maybe you can give us your take on that, on what will take this region forward.
That's a good spread there, Grant. Thanks for that.
Right, that's why the question actually just would like to answer.
Just to speak about transport, I'll ignore the first part of your question for the moment. We're working quite hard with the Queensland Government, with the Transport Department and State Development to reinvigorate the rail corridor back out here. I think we can talk about various companies that are involved in it, but Stuart's been involved with it a lot. We've opened up the contract. We've got promises of finance from Sterling Hickscript recently for the state government 50% requirement that'll be there to upgrade the sidings in Charlton Morgan, Oakey, and there's some other smaller amounts. We now have to get federal government to match that, and we're working on a grant through the Better Regions area. That application will go in from the Merway Shire, but the Japanese are very sensitive about investing in public infrastructure where they're not going to own the asset, and of course it's classic market value. And if you watch, does that mean So there, that's one area to reinvigorate. We saw all the train drivers and all the rail maintenance people leave out here, and now we see them all coming back. And so that's a very good sign as far as the future of rail is concerned. Transport is the classic problem with Australian industry. We've got such enormous distances. But come back onto the that's not the only area, but that's the one that's on the table at the moment, which is quite exciting when we talk about using cattle trains for multimodal transport, redesigning new cattle trains that can carry general freight. You know, these things are innovations where we've been left behind. So that's all good. That's all good news. I think the Toowoomba Airport, we work very closely with the 10 shires. We have this organisation of the 10 shires in southern Queensland. We see a lot of prospects out of Toowoomba Airport for export of a range of product, whether it's potentially raw meat or it's specific cuts or it's I think the main business plan was focused around horticulture, but we see there's a lot more potential. And we're working very closely with Tisby and all the southern shires to get our foot in that door, and also get our foot in the door of the Cooper Basin planning that's coming on, so that we can use the Cooper Basin to reinvigorate the transport corridors back into Western Queensland. Because the focus has been a little bit lost. We've seen the enormous development in the Surat Basin, but the Cooper Basin is, my people refer to the Cooper Basin as the Saudi Arabia of gas. And it would be a tragedy if that development went to South Australia or just through sheer complacency like Queensland. So we're very keen to try and keep that whole agenda happening for Western Queensland, because the transport corridors bring the development. There's no question about it.
So you're seeing positive benefits in the oil and gas industry here for this part of this region?
Well, certainly when you take a long view, like we know about the commodity cycles in Australia. It's just a history. We've been through this numerous times in history, and we will see more cycles. And
perhaps we go to Stephen Tully again. Stephen, are you seeing the benefit from that at all in your business? is there a flow-on effect from the oil and gas industry that's benefiting the agricultural sector in this part of the world?
I think on the whole there definitely is. I mean, there's always problems with some of these things, and it frustrates me somewhat that sometimes what is debated publicly is not the real problem, and you would like to actually get to the real issues and know the level of what's debated. But in the whole, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of farmers in periods of dry times and hard times went away and had a lot of money away and came back and are actually very happy that they've got time to do cash and to spend at home and get a bit of good gear. And you know, there's a lot of people bought new machines, went away and got all their money for them working for oil and gas. We've got a decent bit of the machinery on at home, apart from the cash and the contractors and employing a lot of young people. There's a lot of young contractors out here that have done well out of oil or gas or indirectly on building roads for the shire for oil and gas, etc., etc. So I think as long as it's managed well and the discussions are made and what's promised is implemented, I can't see a problem. It's never going to be one of those things that you take it off the wall, it's going to be all roses, but it's certainly a lot of positive prospects here. And you know, there's a lot of properties out here that are getting a fair bit of cash every year, which is always a good commodity to have when everything else goes up and down.
Just back before too on that city country point that we touched on a moment there about trying to get resources out here and trying to get things out of the city to try and make this region go forward. Is it more difficult to do that if you've got this city country divide? Are you finding that's a problem?
I think that city country divide is very frustrating. The biggest frustrating thing I think for me is that I did say it before, one of the great things living here, I think everyone out here would agree, is that we've got a pretty good environment, a pretty pristine environment. And I don't know a single landholder here that doesn't love their country, and it hurts them nowhere to see anything happen to that country. And then because of that city country divide, you'll more often than not, particularly at the moment, the Labor government accused of being a rapist and a pillager and cruel to all animals. So that's an example there that we really do suffer because of that, and it hurts because we're the exact opposite. But yeah, the city country divide, the internet, the ability to do everything on the internet is just, people don't understand how bad it is. They just can't possibly imagine that what we put up with, and that's probably certainly in many respects, and particularly for young people, I think it's one of the biggest things holding us back. Now, there is all sorts of promises there, but again, in 5 or 10 or 15 years' time, with a bit of long-term planning, is that really going to be good? We should be planning for the next satellite or the next amount of infrastructure at the moment, because it's going to take 5 or 10 years to roll that out. And I just wonder whether when this one finally does get up, we'll be back in the next 5 years.
As I said earlier, I want to spend 20 minutes on each pillar of almost at the end of our first break. Time does go very quickly when you're embracing a good conversation. I'd like to just wrap up this pillar before we move on to our next one, just by getting perhaps a comment from each of the speakers who've spoken so far about, say, the 3 things: focus on solutions, and let's focus on looking at a way forward. 3 things that would have the most positive impact on this region in terms of farm agriculture. Stephen, you've got the microphone. We'll start with you, and then we might move to Tony.
Well, the biggest one directly that affects anyone with property is dog and kangaroo control. I just did a few things last night, and there's 1.2 million kangaroos in Quilpie Shire on their count, and that's unsustainable. Even if there was no cattle or sheep here, that's unsustainable. And we could use a fraction of that here. Quilpie would have another 1,500 medium jobs. And then if you're looking forward, I think great internet connection. You can do anything with internet connection. You can run a business from here. People have done it. Everything from repairing the data right through. Great internet connection is absolutely the most important thing to have. Whether it's doing a university course or something to just be professional development. Everyone has to be professional development now, particularly landowners. I think we're running very good businesses. But even if you want a bit of off-farm income and do a degree, you can do all degrees offline. You just can't download the material, that's all. You can all do it externally, but you just can't download. So those sorts of things there, we really need to be on the ball and have some good planning.
Tony, we might go to you next. Internet, we haven't even talked about internet, but is that one of the things that you would agree with, or do you have your own theory?
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah, the internet at this day and age is a lot of communication and interaction, and that probably is one of the three things that I like in my life. A couple are really inward looking, so they're about getting a really good handle on what the cost of production is, and when you fiddle with various knobs within the business around production, performance, those sorts of things, having a really good understanding on how those things play out in the way of building equity over time, profitability, that sort of stuff. The other part of that is market compliance. We all target particular markets, but how many people go back and review how many kilograms of wool or tons of beef or whatever actually hit those particular markets. The third bit, and this is where the internet comes into it as well, it's about putting time aside to go and poke about. Have a yarn with like-minded people in your industry, but also have a look and have some discussions with people outside your particular industry. What's going on in the motel industry? What are some of the things in there that might be of use, even though you're running a grazing business? What are some of the business management principles that can be transferred across? Different commodity, but some of those principles might be easily applied. And the internet's a great way of developing those contacts and gathering that sort of information. The people part of it.
Thanks, David. Councillor McKenzie, your vision for Quilpie and what will take us there?
Yeah, excuse me. I think the agricultural sector is, I think, poised for a very prosperous time as far as commodity fees go, and I've felt that for some time. We're due, especially with cattle and wool and sheep, especially with cattle, we're due for that jump up, which I think's occurred, and it will be permanent. I'm sure it'll fluctuate. I think we're certainly looking at that with all the information we get from overseas. So that immediately gives you confidence, and I just back completely what Stephen was saying about fencing and having control over your ferals, your pests, and also your grazing pressures. That is a real opportunity for the grazing industry. Following on from that, though, we always have to be mindful of the diversity of our industries and opportunities for everyone who lives out here, because not everyone wants to be grazing, but they might be happy to live with one. So, especially the wives, the children, etc., there has to be other things to do, you know. So, and obviously the council as a regional sort of representative, we face from that all the time about getting that diversity of choice of employment. And once you talk about that, you come back to the internet as being absolutely critical. And you also talk about your basic infrastructure, especially your roads and flight services. We don't talk about our airline services, but the whole world flies everywhere now. You know, my daughter the other day was in Amsterdam through London, you know, because that's where everyone goes, and it's like a bus, everyone just piled in, they didn't have a ticket. And that's, everyone flies, and there's absolutely no reason we really need, and it's something we can talk about a lot of hours, is we have to get those sort of services where you can pick up the Brisbane at good rates. That takes, good use of those airlines and making them profitable enough so you can get that. But yeah, let me go on, honestly, but I think I've got it.
Very good. We might get Paul next. Paul, you talked to 21, said you do a lot of work or in the line of business that Stephen and Lindsay are in. What are they telling you about what they need and what they want to improve their business?
Well, the big thing would be if we could have consistent commodity prices. You know, if they certainly if they could stay here and make life a fair bit easier, but consistency of the price would be is the main thing. You know, if you can budget now, particularly now if we get rain and we have to restock, we're going into an expensive per unit price, and then so consistency after that, and then a supply of capital that can be consistent as well. That you can do a budget long term, because to go from $4 to $2, where $2 might have been a very good price 18 months ago, now there was a big jump there. And that you talk about the internet speed, and it's certainly from our point of view a big thing as well. Options for bus and those type of businesses will be moving from live streaming to live streaming auction shortly, and if you haven't got the internet speed to that, well, it becomes redundant, let alone running the auction as it goes. So there, mate, I think the consistency of commodity prices is a big thing for people in the bush, and that way you can do what you need to.
I'm sure you've got a comment in regards to that. That's your specialty area.
Yeah, Brad, just in terms of that, I think, you know, one of the things, everyone wants to be in control as much of their destiny as they can. At the moment, the producers, it's the weather and it's commodity prices, which are probably two of the most uncontrollable. So perhaps what that means is that going forward, it's about producers probably working closer together. So maybe going back to some of the old cooperatives and reinventing them in the modern world and saying, well, this is a good way to go forward because we can then get the economy of scale and we've got the bargaining power that we need. But if we do that, everyone has to commit 100% to the cooperative because that's what went wrong in the past, where we use them when we would benefit, but then we wouldn't use them. So in the end, that fell down. So I think that working together, collaborating to do that sort of thing is a positive. Can I just say something else about the city-country divide? And I know Lindsay and Stuart, I imagine, would be there when they go down and try and get things for their areas. But I think there has to be a conversation around with federal government, state government as well, and the general population of Australia to say the regions can be part of the solution to the congestion that we're going to see in our capital cities. We just picked over 24 million people. We're predicted to go to 35 to 40 million people by 2050. If at the current trend, probably 2 million of those are living outside the urban areas. So that's going to lead to more congestion, greater cost to service them. So if the regions have a big part to play, if we put in policies at a federal and state level that encourage people to set up businesses and give them the technology to be able to do that, I think we'll solve some of the problems as well.
I think that's an excellent segue to moving to our next bracket because all that mechanisms we will come back to on some of these areas as well. Just about, obviously, to have prosperous agriculture, we need to have thriving towns, we need to have thriving communities as well. David, I'm going to come to you. I know we haven't come to you yet, so you're not going to get away with it by being down there in the corner. Is it even realistic or possible to revitalise some of our towns?
Oh, look, I think certainly. The way forward, I think we hear a lot about cultural tourism, and I think there's a misunderstanding about what that actually is. So cultural tourism is about our culture, it's about all parts of our culture, it's about our food, how and where we live, it's about our uniqueness, what makes Southwest Queensland unique, and within that, what makes some of the towns within that area unique. So obviously, we need to also promote the free things. Stephen's referred to the magic of the landscape out here. You can't put a price on that, and it's not something you can put on a tour brochure. As well as all of the events that happen, and as well as all of the businesses, the fabulous artists and all that they create. Cultural tourism should embrace so much more than that. And I think if we can get on board with that, there's a reason Tasmania are so fabulous at tourism, it's that they don't silo. So there's amazing regional promotion, but cross-regional promotion. Stuart referred to, the showcase stuff that he did for regional areas, and we need to keep doing that. We need to do it regularly, we need to do it often, and we need to mix it up so that people know what we've got out here.
So is there one unified story for the Southwest? I'm happy to hear from others on the panel here about that. And if there's not, then why not? I mean, is there one brand that says come to this region because it's whatever it might be? Is there that story that we're telling?
I think that's selling it short. I think it's like an ensemble cast. So the magic of these areas out here is the diversity and the difference between the areas and the characters, the magic of each town independently, and then the landscape across the area.
So have there been efforts made in this regard? I mean, Lindsay?
It's strange you should say that, Brandon. We'll be launching our Southwest Queensland logo early May at an Economic Development Forum in Charleville.
We have an early look at that. We'd love to scoop
Look,
the
I'd
paper
love
next
to,
week.
I don't carry it around with me. And we'd probably dampen the impact, man. I'll make sure you get a great shot on the 11th of May. But that's what we're about, is trying to brand all our tourism and all the activities that happen in southwest Queensland with an overall brand. So there is a lot of diversity and there's a lot of competition, but it's the bigger picture, and Stuart brings a lot to the table from his outback tourism experience in that area.
Sure. But I think admittedly there's communities and there's towns in this region that are doing better than others, or are doing better than others. What do, and I'm happy to hear comments from everyone on the panel, and from you, Dr. Kelso as well. We haven't heard from you yet, and that's not sure if I have directed any questions at you.
I've got lots to say.
I know you do. Maybe we could send a microphone up this way and hear from you on this point as well. What do our thriving towns have in common? I mean, there must be a common thread that makes some of these communities more, let's say, successful than others.
Well, just on that comment, I think that the community, the atmosphere of that community, each of our towns in Southwest have a different community atmosphere, but there are certain things that unite them, and that's the reason I've stayed out here. I came for 2 years and have stayed for 12, is because the community come together, they make you feel warm, welcome, invite you to things, get involved, and that's why the majority of tourists don't just come back to outback Queensland. Once they come multiple times, we see the same people from Victoria come through St George every year because they're coming back for a fairly unique opportunity. In Quilpie, driving out here today, is very unique. There is nowhere else just like Quilpie. And you don't have to go right into the middle of Ayers Rock to see the Australian outback. You can come here to Quilpie. And part of selling that is really all the things the other people have mentioned. It's that internet access. Everyone's looking on the internet now for tourism opportunities, for accommodation. If you don't have that and it's not working well, you're being hamstrung in the town of Quilpie because your internet is perfect. The internet speed and getting and pushing, we need to push for internet speed out here. We're sitting back waiting for it to roll out, and that's not going to cut it. Because as someone's already said, in 10 years' time when it arrives, it'll be old news. We need to have the cutting edge stuff now. That's how we're going to use online markets to better market our agricultural products, to get them on the plane at Toowoomba, to get them into China at a better price. Because we're competing with a much higher processing cost, which has already been mentioned. So we need to get a better value product onto the shelves of Asia quicker, and we can do that with better infrastructure, such as the faster internet, to do those things.
That's just saying we need to do this. Who is it that needs to do it? Who needs to drive it? Is it local government? Is it the private sector that needs to jump up and down and make more noise? I mean, what's the silver bullet here? How do we achieve this?
There's no one part of our community can be the person. Everything has to be driven. All our local governments, state government, federal government, all the private sector guys you see sitting here, all the agricultural representatives, and us as medical representatives push every chance we get that the internet speed is just not quick enough, and we need to get it fixed now.
You're a business operator as well, I imagine, in a sense, in St George. How does it affect you in terms of delivering high quality medical care?
So we use the internet more and more for video consultations, telehealth. To have your telehealth cut in and out and go all grainy is absolutely useless. The person at the other end gets frustrated, the patient sitting there gets frustrated, and if your internet drops out 4 times through your consultation, it takes 2 minutes to connect, you just triple the time it takes for you to have that consultation. So it hamstrings business and is inhibiting health by not having fast enough internet access. And all levels of government and all the people around the table today need to push that we're not happy with the internet speed. We're not happy to wait 10 years for the internet to roll.
So is this on your agenda, Stuart? Mayor of Quilpie? I mean, is it something you're pushing for?
The communication comes up everywhere. So far behind. It's frustrating to go away and see the ads they've got now where they're trying to sell uptake of NBN where they've got people that can't download their movies sort of quick enough. And we as a council have actually financially contributed to mobile phone schemes out here. One of 2 towns there in Grenada, everything's up on mobile still come, just so people in those towns can actually have a mobile service. So and that's that's just the start. If you don't have a mobile service, then it's almost impossible for people to live there. And just on that, and with Dr. talking about health services, whenever we talk about economic development and livability of towns and which towns sort of progress and what don't, you can't get away from the basics. And because if you haven't got good medical services, you haven't got good communications services, people might think they're living it doesn't know what else you've got. So you've got to start with basics and you need to feed on that.
Stephen, in terms of your business, operating a business, internet speeds, issue for you?
It's a massive issue for us. So, my wife's studying, so all of last year she came into Quilpie to download everything. Now we're very lucky from the school. We've got 3 kids at school on distance ed. That was an absolute nightmare last year. It was just nearly impossible to do. So everything's online, they have their own computers. It was nearly impossible. We have just gone on to a trial. Satellites to work out what distance ed kids need, etc. I had an operator break down the other day. I had to download a catalogue. Couldn't get anyone to help me download the catalogue on the internet on my home speed. Just so it was 26 megs. And this new satellite it took about 20 seconds. I couldn't believe it, and that would still not be good enough for anyone at Brisbane because they wouldn't be able to handle that. But because of that, I've now got a machine not on the dump. Because, ring up away, they just laugh at you. So you can do these things. That's just one example. That's not livestock marketing. That's not picking out what market reports are. If we need to compete as landholders and individuals and groups, we need to compete with meatworks and grid prices and everything else. The internet's going to beat them. I mean, that's the one that's going to make everyone on that level field and compete because that's done for a lot of people. It takes you 2 seconds to find out what markets are. Who's got really right, who's got a good price. And that'll level the playing field right up. It's just every aspect of business. That's not just staff retention. Staff retention, you've got to get a 19-year-old, excuse me, out to work. If they don't have communication there, and I can fully understand and see the point, if they don't have communication there, that's what they need. That's how they meet up with their others in the area. That's how they meet all the social things. It keeps them in contact. They love to work. They want to be here. You have to provide that service for them all over the month.
And of course, the internet, and I'm directing now this question back to you, Peter, as well. I know you're on Twitter there tweeting out stuff using the hashtag Queensland, as I hope you all are. Coming back to the internet and social media, I suppose, and connectivity as well amongst people in these communities. Is that an issue if people aren't connected in that way? Is that an impediment to building that sense of community and culture that we were talking about before?
I think definitely there's 2 points here. One involves the internet and the limited internet and the way we can interact using that, particularly as the other gentleman said, radio. The second step of this though goes beyond the internet and it's about the social interface. So I had a conversation with someone who no longer lives in the bush many years ago, and we were talking about when HF radios gave way to phones, and for young women, often they would be listening to the last session, and that was their connectivity with the outside world. Once it was a telephone, if they were, personally depressed, or even if they just had a bad day and needed to feel like they belonged beyond the boundary fence of their station, then they had that connection automatically, whereas with the phone, you won't pick it up and do it. So I think, yes, the internet is very important. It's important to have that interface with the world for us to go ahead. But I think you can't underestimate the importance of developing community and the social interface that people get from face-to-face interaction.
And we'll just stay with you also for one moment as well, because also it leads on to our next pillar, which is about young people. It's obviously a massive, I have young children as well, it's a massive thing for young people to get onto social media and to connect, not always used in the most positive ways, but in the bush, is it an important function in that regard, and is that why we need good internet in that regard? If you could expand on that, please.
Oh, look, I think it's definitely a part of it for all of the reasons outlined previously. But for me, I think what concerns me about the issues with our young people is that we're looking for an easy fix. You know, if we fix their internet, that's going to fix them up because it's going to give them, you know, what we think they need. You know, my concern with that is that we actually rarely ask our young people what it is that they need. So if we're going to work with our young people and we're going to be able to support them as they grow, to nurture them, we're going to have to, at some point, invite them to the table to have a conversation.
Well, what do they want? What are they telling us? I mean, it's interesting that we don't even have a young person on our panel today. We did try, and unfortunately it hasn't happened. I'm looking around the room, and no offence to anyone in the room, I'm not seeing a lot of young people in the room either. So where is it? Where is it? I mean, it depends on where you are. I mean, constantly. Lucy's the journalist.
Well, I looked at Lucy for correction when I make this next comment.
I would like to, I mean, their voice is not being heard here either,
So for me,
that's part of the issue, isn't it? We're not hearing from them, we don't know what they want, and we don't know what their message is.
and I think for us to nurture the way forward, we're going to have to look a little bit to research. I think, you know, there's very sound research that says the best youth programs are youth-led youth. You know, and the way that happens is that we encourage our young people, we mentor them, we train them, we believe in them, we invest in them. And that sounds very simple, but it really happens on the ground, and it happens even less often west of the Great Divide. For me also, there's some interesting research from Australia's only demographer, I think sometimes Bernard Salt, about that I utilised in my previous role in volunteering. So it's about the way that we approach different demographics of people. So, you know, I'm sure I'm not on my own here when I say people assume that Gen Y don't want to volunteer or they don't want to get involved. When really it couldn't be further from the truth. The issues that they engage in that are important to them, they will take an issue, build on it, work hard, and support it all the way to the end. The trick is at the beginning of the equation, you have to invite them to the table. Whereas, you know, I'm sort of Generation X and we'll put our hand up. We'll say, here I am and I have these skills. Do you want my skills? I'm bringing them to the table, I'm offering them to you. Whereas the research tells us that that's not necessarily so for Generation Y. So we're going to have to engage with them in a different way if we want to lock into their magic. And, you know, if we want to, I guess, stem the flow of what I see in my day job at Lifeline, you know, I have 14 clients and over a third of them are young people. Our young people are hurting, they're harming themselves, and that opens a whole heap of other health issues on them.
Is that because we don't have opportunities here for them? I mean, they will hear from you, Lindsay, on this, but I know that the issues of young people is a great interest of yours. Are there enough opportunities for young people in the southwest to develop and grow?
Well, it splits into a couple of sections. There's the unemployed welfare state type young people that require major strategic change in how we operate. And then there's the farm type young people. And like one of all the submissions we've put into countless white papers, and we've addressed I don't know how many ministers about farm succession and what has to happen in farm succession. Farmers just aren't in a position now, and I'm taking farmers as the main audience of the agribusiness sector. They're not in a position just to hand on the farm because they have to retire, they need the house, they need to be able to live. So that succession part of the equation has been very much part of our long-term submissions in drought. We're talking about drought, we're talking about agribusiness long-term financial solutions for young people, so the business can actually take on the young, transfer the ownership within the business. And it's not just the family farm we're talking about. We probably, we'll go another step, we probably have to think very seriously about the family farm. Like, it's got to be a business structure in today's world, and it may not just be the family around the table. There may be other skills that are needed around the table with marketing experience or cooperative experience, so that we can develop and become price takers. We can have some market power rather than just be price takers, which has been one of the serious problems we've had over the last 30 or so years. We just take whatever price is put in front of us because we have no market power. So that's all tied up in young people, and we've put it to the various treasurers, that succession needs to be very much part of a package for the bush, whether it was the white paper or it's all intertwined. And so far, there's been limited possibilities. I'm sure there's some money around for young people, but it's the overall strategy and the acceptance of that strategy for the bush more broadly is what we've got to embrace. So I won't even start on the social issues.
Sure. Maybe we'll go to Tony next. Succession planning is an area of interest of yours, and succession planning. I mean, is it difficult for young people to get ahead in farming?
Oh, sure. And
why is that?
succession planning is a really tough topic, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. That structuring and managerial transformation over time, whether you're a multi-million-dollar corporate business or a family show with 2 or 3 partners in it, the amount of effort and time and thought that goes into those processes is really big. And there's certainly some policy frameworks that could be manipulated and pressured through various organisations around the place that would be able to make programs and solutions a bit more useful, particularly in the primary production sector. I know from QRAA's perspective, our average first start loan applicant is about 37 years old. So that's roughly where that program within QRAA is working. We'd like to see that come down a bit. But there's also some policy and regulatory and guideline amendments that possibly need to transform as we see new business models starting to gain a bit of traction.
Stephen, is this an issue for you at all that you've had to confront, or is it something that you factor into your business or your long-term plan?
Well, certainly, it's we've just gone through a second stage of it in the last couple of months, but it's definitely an issue. But it's I think, Dad tells me that back in his time, anyone could be a successful farmer, whereas at the moment he said you have to be a very good businessman. You have to be at the top of your game. If you're not at the top of the game in all aspects of farming, you're going to struggle. And because of that, money's tight, and that makes all of those succession things and everything else is complex. I just think from my point of view, I was lucky enough to always know where I stood the entire time, and if I didn't like it, I could go. And it was always open, and we, both Dad and myself, always knew where we stood with each other, and exactly we could walk away at any time, and there would be no real feeling. Everyone knew what they were in. So I think that's a great start. It's not to have anything expected or owed anything, have it all up front, and then things change. You go through a couple of severe droughts, you might want to be there. So if you know where you stand, you can make the decisions for the right reasons. And so I think that starts right from when a son leaves school or when he comes home, or even before that. You basically start, you know where you are, you can walk away at any time and we'll still be friends.
Sure. Locke, I would see you nodding your head there as well, what Stephen was saying. I mean, are you seeing young people getting ahead and making a start of it, or is it, like Tony says here, much later in life where they're actually having a break?
Yeah, look, certainly it's much later in life, and I think that's driven by a couple of things. And, so Stephen's example is sort of one where people get in and they address the issue and it's on the table very early and they understand what the expectations of all the parties are. Unfortunately, there's in too many cases that's not the way it works. And it's not until there's something happens in the family that force that issue, and then all of a sudden, the plan has to start. We've got it, it's probably too late. But I think the other major driver though is it comes back to profitability in my mind. Like if you've got a viable industry and everyone's making enough money out of it, it makes that whole discussion about succession a whole lot easier, and therefore people will be more inclined to start earlier. So I think it's not a deliberate thing that people aren't doing it. It's more about the reality of where they are. I think that's a major concern. So returning viability, I think it's got to be the starting point, viable industries.
So if we have more viable industries here, the young people would come back. We've seen that in the southwest that our young people are going away because they want to build a future for themselves elsewhere. Lindsay, I hear you say, there. Would you like to give us your insights on that?
Well, definitely, that's what's happening, and there are.
How do we get them back?
Well, that's the big question, and once again, we come back to the economic unit. That's the basis of the farm. We're seeing massive change going on, but the sheer profitability, you can have an international corporate buy a huge amount of land, but there's still not any more profitable. The scale in a lot of cases isn't there in the western areas, so they're still no more profitable. They're still going to get burnt by their various boards down the track because they're not producing results. And a lot of this is a long-term issue. This started in the main in the 70s with the enormous oil shocks and interest rates went to 20%. Farm costs went up enormously, and we haven't recovered since. And you can chart the CPI or farm costs, and it does an enormous leap right through that period, and it continues to now. Whereas the commodity, the international markets have only been paying a commodity price, which is down here. They don't know about our high cost of labour. They pay us what's an international price. So that's squeezed the farm. And you talk to the old timers who talk about how a bale of wool bought so much, and a fat bought paid a man for a month, and all these sort of things. Now you've got families doing all the labour on the farm in a lot of cases. You've got wives that are doing enormous. You've got husbands. You've got the family units under enormous pressure, and it's cost pressure. And you can track it very clearly, but it doesn't come onto the agenda. Every time a cost increases more than the CPI, it takes it away from the farmer because the domestic costs, and we're pretty much playing in the international market. So, it's been around a long time, but it's not politically acceptable to think too much about it because we're a small sector and we haven't got a lot of political clout. But that's the reality, is that we've just been squeezed.
So what are the industries in this region that's going to generate the jobs for our young people and give them a better future? I might go to you, Locke. You got a picture on this at all?
Look, I'm probably the least qualified, or there's certainly a lot more people better qualified on the panel here in this room about the Quilpie area. But just looking at it, some of the things mentioned already, the perimeter fencing to control, so you can control the destiny in terms of what you can run on that property and what you can do with it, has got to be a positive. In my mind, that means you're looking at the sheep and wool industry being able to come back in. That brings a lot of employment to towns. I think when the wool price crashed in 1990, we saw the exodus of a lot of people from these sort of areas, and I think that's possibly a big drive. And so others that qualify specifically.
Well, what I'm hearing here is mining, agriculture, and tourism. Is there anything else, Stuart?
No, well, that's about it. I mean, construction is the other pillar of the previous government, and council under enormous pressure to maintain road building, buildings, some sort of level of activity all the time. There's a lot of people dependent on it as a major employer. But certainly tourism is one of the most potential, and from the local government point of view, it's also the industry given the most impact on. And that's sort of the catch-cry I say is in my tourism role that I go as far as to say if your local government isn't very supportive of tourism, it's going to really struggle. But the biggest, what we're all chasing from a local government point of view is to be the sort of the seed funder of that industry to get it going, and then hopefully once you get the numbers us to a level where private enterprise will come in, and that's where it really starts to boom. And we're a long way from that in the West generally. Even in places like Longreach and that, they still don't have a huge number of tourism, dedicated tourism operators, but they're way advanced with what we're on the southwest. But that's the ideal. And the other thing that often has become apparent to me too is that with the urban lifestyle now being so controlled, almost like living in a bubble, controlled environment, and more, the notion of going west will become one of those things that everyone has to do. People have actually said it should be part of the curriculum, part of the education. Kids have to go west for a certain number of months or whatever, because you will only get to understand Australia and where it's come from, and the development of the country if you do that. And that's the role we're going to play in the future. But there's a huge potential.
Can you expand that a little bit more? I mean, if you're having some influence over curriculum or city message, and then I'm thinking, what was it, messages in the city about maybe this is your new branding strategy that you maybe that message.
We've already got a scheme.
What the strategy is.
Yeah, well, there's already there's already a subsidised scheme for kids to bus out to the west, and some arrange for this area this year. The government pays that subsidy, and that's been expanded, and that could certainly go a lot further. Only talking a few mil in that now, but potentially it could go.
When you get to that, what are you showing them and what are you telling them?
Everything. Wherever you go, it will be wonderful.
Oh,
they can go to the property, obviously. The history, the pastoral history, working shearing shed or whatever. They can just drop into the towns, they can go to any of the points of interest at any of the towns, anywhere, because everything they do is new, and everything they do is of huge interest. And it goes back to what I said earlier about the parents in the urban areas actually can see the advantage of having some sort of connection to the regions and having some sort of input from a regional way of life into their kids growing up. And I've actually talked to a businessman in Brisbane who's told me he only employs kids from the bush. And it is so apparent that they are different in the best possible way as an employee, and that's it's a huge thing that we can do.
Absolutely, I'd like to look at some of those qualities and talk about those. Paul, I mean, your business is a big employer of young people, and the majority of them come from the bush. What do you look for in the young people that you take in?
So the vast majority of people that start with us now in the trainee program go back to our early to mid 20s. They've been, for lack of a better word, lean, and but yeah, seen a few things in the world, and then what we're looking for is people with aptitude, and then they have told that they must move every 3 months, and they will go from. One example, Charters Towers lad is now in Bairnsdale in Victoria. He'll do the mountain calf sales, which not many people get to do. He then has the opportunity probably to go to Geraldton, and then he'll end up somewhere back close to home. So in that, he gets to build a whole new level. And so we're after somebody that has the ability to travel and therefore and a good attitude, because in the end, they're part of everyone's business. When they can't get to a town, get married and have kids, go to schools, and I mean, we could get more resilient businesses out here, then I don't know what Elders of Quilpie used to look like, but I could imagine that it was probably at least 6 people, maybe 8. I know when I moved to Longreach, there was 10 in the business that I worked in. Now there's 1. So that's something that over time has got worse. And generally for those western towns, it'll be that we don't have a wool travel, we don't have free merchandise servicing the wool business. You have Sam and Josie here, because that's all the business can maintain. So if we can get a more resilient, if you can get $4 for your cars, you're more likely to put a few more pickets in, roll a bit of polypipe out, employ another person, run more sheep, need more agents, sell more, so we get more and away it goes, you know, and I mean, we're only a small part of it, but that's what we're after, is those bright people that can shift around and then eventually they'll be somebody that comes from Newcastle that ended up at the country pub and now works for St Quilpie, so that's what I think.
It certainly paints a picture though of a long-term sort of decline of opportunities for young people. Is that why we're seeing the issues that you're seeing today that you spoke about before, the self-harm and some of the other issues as well that young people's self-destructive type behaviours that you're witnessing?
I don't think they're necessarily related. You know, I think some of these issues are an issue of this generation. It's the way that they deal with their hurt, without going into a long, very complicated explanation. And I think it takes a lot of my generation and older, it takes all of our powers to sit on the edge and try and help and try and understand. It's a very difficult thing to understand. But I think certainly, you know, I agree with Stuart, you know, when you travel, our young people are well received, not only in our own country, but internationally. So obviously we are doing some things right. The trick is, as communities, we need to learn how to harness that. Because, you know, they're going elsewhere because they want it elsewhere.
Maybe we get the microphone back up this end of the table and hear from Dr. Adam, also on the front line, GP, clinician. You must see plenty of this walking through your front door of young people struggling in the bush.
Yes, there's no doubt that a lack of opportunities, you know, often frustration with, you know, inconsistency in employment. Yeah, and you know, that comes to be a bit of a trend. Once upon a time, if you're a young bloke, you could pick up a job doing a bit of shearing, a bit of farm work if you didn't have a lot of other skills. Now we see the young blokes that go away and do ag, do uni, often come back, but the other guys often don't stay in town. There's not as many opportunities as they leave. And those who do stay in town, particularly Lindsay mentioned before, the issues in regards to a cycle of welfare dependence that is very, very difficult to break. And successive governments and industries have tried, but you know, we need to really focus that it's not an easy answer there. Speaking from the medical point of view, we recognised probably 10, 15 years ago that all our doctors were getting old, and there didn't seem to be any draw to rural areas. So we changed the way we selected doctors. We tried to get more coming from a rural area, and then once we got them into university, we sent them on, University of Queensland, for example, sends them on a compulsory term to, as a medical student, to a rural area. I put in for Gundawindi, and I can get it for St George. And I ended up back there 5 years later, having graduated from uni, had done a few years, and then had a course that I could do partly in rural area. So I didn't have to do all my training in the city, then go to the country. I was mentored along with a program that I could do my training in rural areas. And that's really part of the future of building our rural medical workforce, is selection, experience in a rural area, and then keeping them in that rural area, sort of a grow your own type program. The Rural Generalist Training Program and regional training providers in general practice have seen that. We're only just now, it takes a long time to train to be a fully experienced doctor, and it takes 10 years. We're only starting to see the fruits of that come through with young people coming to rural areas. And I'm very optimistic for the future of rural Queensland. We already lead the country, I think, in getting young rural doctors into rural sites, and I think that we will, I'm very optimistic that will continue. We just need to have now a program of mentoring them, and then succession planning for those guys as well, to then move into practice and learning the business side of that takes even longer. So it's good potential.
So this leads into our next pillar here. We're now going to talk about health and well-being in our communities and the state of view. I mean, what really, can you drill down a bit more specifically about what has been key about getting doctors out into our communities, in communities that don't have a big population base? I mean, what can you just give us a bit more detail about how that's been achieved in getting young people to work in our rural communities?
Well, I think we're using lots, there's no one answer for this, there's lots of answers. So, Bruce Chater from Theodore's very famous for always saying, if you've seen one country town, you've seen one country town. And that each individual town needs a different solution. And we need to be able to have the flexibility to think outside the box. So a town that's traditionally had a doctor there for 25 to 30 years, they then have to look at a mentoring role to get younger people in. And the young people of today are not going to work the same hours that your doctor did 25 years ago. There's a different expectation now with work-life balance. They're not going to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They actually want to have time off. They actually want to spend time with their families. They don't want to be going in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and then working all day the next day. So the models have had to change, and that's taken a long time. You often hear people, when I talk to people around the country, going, Doc so-and-so, you'd always find him, he was always there, knock on his door, whatever time of night. The reality is, people 25 years ago didn't knock on the door of the doctor at 5 o'clock in the morning for a runny nose that happened an hour. The expectations of the patients has changed. The workload of the doctors, particularly as far as our after hours, has changed. And we've had to look for innovative models for how we can handle the extra burdens of on call, the extra mix, the days of the one doctor giving you an anaesthetic, taking the baby out, resuscitating the baby, coming back and sewing up, and then waking you up. They're all gone. You need 3 people to do the same job that one person once did. And I don't see that the old models are going to apply. It's going to be innovation, use of technology, and you're going to need to have more people on the ground to do the job that was once done by one bloke who will be 25 years ago.
Councillor Godfrey, if I can go to you, because you manage the Southwest, chair of the Southwest Health Service, which takes in the area that works at St George. I mean, can rural communities sustain this model?
Well, it's difficult. It sounded like a bit of a plaque for St George, I think. Must be a great place, St George. It's probably it's our number one issue, probably, is a consistent flow of doctors into our various 17 practices hospitals and MPHSs and various clinics around the place that we operate. Bertie Hutchinson was a doctor in Cunnamulla, and that was the first practice to collapse in 2005. So since then, I think we've got 17, and I won't say that too loudly because it could be 18 by tomorrow. So what we've been using has been the locum model, and the locum model has filled the gap. So it's very expensive. It doesn't fulfil all the community expectations because the community like to go and have something, they like to go and see Adam again and whatever. When they have a different doctor there every time they come, the word gets around the community quickly, and it's very difficult. And there's also the records side of it when you have a completely new medical team coming in all the time, the records become absolutely paramount. That the medical record of all the patients is consistent, and we haven't really got on top of that properly yet. We've come a long way, but getting all the records around the various communities unified is an absolute challenge, so that when a doctor comes in, he knows what's being prescribed. I won't go into all of that, but doctors, just the sheer cost of locums, this puts enormous pressure on our budgets. Certainly not knocking locums because we couldn't operate without them. We're moving into a new model, and we're hoping the rural generalist model is going to provide a lot higher standard of service throughout the southwest. And as these rural generalists come online, and we're training 40, 50, something like that every year, something, as they start coming online and there's more of them, they're passionate about the bush and want to live in the bush. And it's going to be up to us to develop relationships with the communities and introduce them to the communities and sort of make sure that transition works well. We're doing that at Charleville at the moment. We think we've recruited a very capable EDMS for Charleville, who will also be in control of the towns around Charleville, hopefully. Quilpie will be one of those. So, you know, the medical model, that would be our biggest challenge, is that there's only farmers' wives who will not want leisure time, as far as I can see. Doctors, the work-leisure balance, you know, it's an enormous factor in making that decision.
You were quoted in Queensland Country Life this week saying that, you know, that the way in which to increase medical services to increase the population base. So how have you been able to increase services here if the population base hasn't been growing?
Well, we had our own Super Tuesday, and I think that the block-funded model is going to stay with us for some time yet. We've been quite terrified of population-based funding models that Canberra have been talking about because our population is dwindling. When we're required under our service agreements to deliver a certain standard of services. So population-based funding is a bit of a nightmare, and health doesn't really understand it either. In local government, we are population-based funded too, apart from our rates. But the FAG grant has a formula. Someone quite rural, I think, wrote the formula. So it really adjusts the grant for remoteness, for a whole range of factors, which means we come out of it quite well. And it capped the urban councils. So we did very well. The thought of capping Metro North would be quite amazing, wouldn't it? I think we could have a smile about the reaction from Metro North if we capped their funding and we didn't cap the rural. So they're the challenge. It's this funding model. We all know the health funding model is not sustainable, what's going on. And we are looking very closely at what we can do through the primary healthcare model. And the innovative thing that we've done is joined up the 3 rural Western HHS hospital health services, and we are pretty much the owners of the primary healthcare network out here. So that's just getting going. They've appointed a very capable manager called Stuart Gordon, who's had a lot of experience in New South Wales. We're hoping to really lift primary care throughout our whole region with this new model. But that can also maybe provide some assistance in the doctor area, because it's basically primary care we're talking about.
Well, go back to Adam for one moment as well. I see that of yours where you said that medical care, and I know your colleague Dr. John Hall now talked before also said the same thing, that medical care is a basic human right for all people, regardless of where they live. Can you tell us how that applies in rural Queensland?
Well, I think for too long, we've just accepted in rural areas that, well, you know, we don't quite get the same level of healthcare. You know, healthcare is a universal human right, recognised by the World Health Organization. And for too long, we've just been happy to sit by. That time has passed. We need to fight for every dollar. We know that in rural areas, we're basically trying to find a better word on the run for being ripped off, but we're not getting as much of a health spend as we should. And, you know, the rural areas have a good right to fight for it. This is where the sheep are grown. This is where the cattle are exported from. This is where we generate the wealth from the nation. So we should be fighting for a better share of the health dollar. You know, rural guys are just being underfunded in a per capita basis, and we need to push for more of that funding. Funding is not going to sort of solve all those answers though. A lot of it's going to come down to innovative systems, getting people on the ground, keeping them on the ground. When a doctor looks to come to a rural area, they look at the same sorts of things. Is there a school there? Where can my kids go to school? Do I have to send them to boarding school? And if so, is there an airport nearby that has flights that I can get down there? Is there a rail service and transport infrastructure? I want to know that, that there is going to be a police service and that there's going to be, various other activities, sporting activities, stuff in the community for me to do. So doctors look at all that sort of stuff. They also look, what's my spouse going to do? What job can I get for my spouse? And that can be very difficult if your spouse happens to be a scientist in a very rare area of study, or work as a marketing director. Perhaps working as a marketing director now, if you have internet speeds that are high enough, is going to be a potential advantage. There's potential look outside the box, work in a high-speed internet environment. You can be a marketing executive for commodities trade into China from St. George. So I think overall, each individual town will come up with a plan, and they have to work very closely with local government, HHS, primary care networks, to get that right model that works for you. What works well in Longreach, what works well in St. George, maybe doesn't work in Charleville, and it may not work in Quilpie. So each individualised spot, and that makes it very difficult for health plans, because they just want to know, well, I just need a plan that we can put in place, and well, there isn't one. And as Lindsay pointed out, there's lots of myriad challenges that come with just finding that right person.
So there's specific health issues that are unique to this part of the world that's different across other parts of rural Queensland that we need to be focusing on?
Well, definitely, rural people have worse outcomes in a lot of their considerations. Cancer, for example, and a lot of that has got to do with service provision. We also, statistically, rural areas tend to have higher incidence of heart disease, diabetes. A lot of that, unfortunately, has got to do with our waistline. So, having mutton chop and 3 beds for each 3 meals a day doesn't go well to the waistline long term. So, a lot of that comes down to. Well, yeah.
And we love it. There's nothing wrong with it.
I know that I sent a referral to my dietitian, and she was fairly new, fresh from the city, and this is her first placement out. And I said in my referral about the meat 3 veg 3 times a day, and she thought I was joking. And then she came to me afterwards and said, I spoke to that bloke and he wasn't joking. I said, no, that's why I wanted you to try and help you with some dietary changes. So I think that there's lots to do in that regard. We can improve health by having doctors on the ground, but we can also improve health by some health promotion, getting programs that are run in the city out in the country, and getting that information out there. And we come back to, we could do a lot faster with faster internet.
We haven't, a lot of that, of course, is all about physical health. We haven't touched on the area of mental health. We hear a lot about that, especially in the bush, drought, etc. Davida, again, I'm looking at you on this particular point. You touched on before and said there's a lot that we're actually doing right, and that's probably where I would like to focus our attention right now is, in that mental health space, what are some of the things that we are doing right or are now doing better than what we did before?
Well, probably 2 things. To start off with, the fact that it's on the table, we're talking about it. We're talking about not only mental illness, but mental health. So that's my first point. The second point that I would make is that over the last couple of years, it's been an incredible amount of money thrown at mental health. My rider, however, would be 2 years ago when the Minister came to Charleville and held a mental health round table. Lawrence Springbrook at the time, yeah. he basically said that the feedback that he received from that forum was, please don't give the money to people who don't have tenure in our communities. They need to understand our communities in the context of the work. Almost immediately afterwards, the money was given to 2 organisations that, you know, in central Queensland don't do a lot west of Rockhampton, and in our area, an organisation that don't really do a lot west of Roma. So, you know, probably the people that we're looking at here will be able to give you a better read of how much of that mental health money, both in terms of promoting good mental health and also access to someone when you perhaps don't have good mental health, is actually getting through to the grassroots level. My understanding in Charleville is that it's not really. You know, a DV counsellor who comes out every court date probably isn't meeting the need necessarily. And even building that into community, you know, renting a room from an existing organisation rather than bringing the workers to live in Charleville and renting your own office, which then supports the social and economic infrastructure, is probably very wise, but it's not happening. And the other thing that I would say is in mental health, one size doesn't fit all. You know, we need to tailor the services to what the needs are on the ground, and to do that, we're actually going to need to talk to people about what those needs are.
Thanks very much, Ben. Well, in about 5 minutes' time, we're going to open the floor up to questions from all of you, but until we get to that point, I want to get a 30-second grab from each of you about something that will make the most positive impact to this area. And maybe we'll start back down this end of the table with that, and we'll work out one at a time. So we do have an extra microphone here too, which I should probably do. So we don't have to share. We should hold these forums more often.
We need 2 microphones.
All right, start with you. You've got 30 seconds. This is your elevator pitch. What's going to make a difference?
So in health, the big things that are going to make a difference are getting people on the ground. And in order to do that, we need to make it the right environment, make people welcome into our towns, get them to come, and then keep them. So we need to look after the people we've got. And once we get a service working, that takes time, but once we get it, we need to not bugger it up. Okay, so we need to look after it and nurture it. Point number 2 is all this would be much easier if we improve our infrastructure. So we have a better chance of attracting people to town and keeping them there if our infrastructure needs are met. So that's high-speed internet, roads, air communications, mobile communications. So we need to have that. Third thing really is thinking outside the box. What we've traditionally done may not be the answer. We need to think about innovative models, and they often are hybrid models, mixtures of healthcare provision using technology, using nurse practitioners. There's lots of things we need to do to think outside the box to solve the problem.
Yeah, probably from my perspective for South West Queensland, obviously the 3 big industries are ag, tourism, mining. There's probably another industry that's sitting below those 3 that we really haven't capitalised on, and the internet and some of the issues that Adam raised will support that industry. And it's the unused intellectual capacity sitting in this room and in this community that hasn't got the opportunity to be aired either in the agricultural, tourism or mining sector, but it might be that bit of intellectual skill or professional ability or whatever that is sitting in Quilpie that can be sold all around the world. I've got a person I know that has just spent quite a bit of time travelling across Europe and America, and has been able to do consultancy jobs for businesses in Australia. So that was all driven on the back of internet capability, being able to interact with people and do that research and that consultancy type work from anywhere in the world. So there's a bit of grunt untapped in the community, and there's some opportunity there to grab hold of it.
Following on a bit from I had a presentation somewhere that I looked at Generation Y as being shown to have the biggest uptake of small business, as in taking on small business
of more capacity than any other generation ever before. Obviously, the internet's got a lot to do with that, but it's recognising that, because we don't have no idea really what jobs and what opportunities are going to open up, even in 10 years' time, with where technology's going. But look, Quilpie's a bit fortunate, and I can't tell you exactly why, but we have a number of young people take up businesses here, buy old businesses or start new ones. Our school numbers are up. Our 3 main schools in the Shire, the kids, so it's a great place for bringing up families. In a nutshell, to provide an environment that young people, if they come here, will stay here. There is nothing more important. Everything we discussed today leads to that, and our entire future is dependent on that. And pretty, as I said, pretty well everything we discussed in some way has some influence on that. And young people attract young people. So if you've got that sort of nucleus, the schools are thriving, the basic services are there, the opportunities are there, which all comes back to the internet, etc. Yeah, I think the future's bright. And just talking about the southwest generally, this is for the whole region of Queensland really, but our basic agricultural industry has never recovered from the drought that started in 2001 to 2009, right across this region. We tend to forget that. We're only 5 or 6 years down the track, a couple of wet seasons, another 3 or 4 really dry ones. We cannot, all of us that are old enough can remember the period from the mid-70s through to the early 2000s, when we had dry years, sure, but we had generally seasons were good enough to maintain stock numbers, etc. We have extra challenges now with kangaroos, which we've talked about, whatever, but there's absolutely no reason why, we've got to remember that that's why we're in the situation we're in. There's absolutely no reason why the future can't be bright.
Yeah, I think if you ask any kid that's grown up and left and gone away and had another job somewhere, could be overseas, anywhere else, and you ask them where home is, Quilpie's always home. And I think given the right environment and right opportunities and a community that actually likes to support them and give them a go, I think all of them are always looking for some opportunity to come home. So if you can provide the right services, and right at the moment that's probably the internet, because again it goes back to everything we do now and more so even in the future, but you provide the right services, the right attitude, and just a really positive thing, an area for them to come back to. I think they all want to come back. You just got to give them excuse.
I believe that consistency of commodity price will be what helps the southwest. And to get that, we need to use a variety of different markets. So, we need a strong and resilient processor market. We need to keep pressure on that processor market by going onto live export as well, to keep the processors through New South Wales, and to look at a lot of different markets and areas. And it was brought up earlier, perhaps the co-ops of old, or grouping, your commodities together might be the way of the future. In doing it in reverse, instead of ringing up, say, 4 extra cows, finding out what is the article that end user might want. They might want a HGP cow, they might want a HGP-free cow. And if you can group 500 up together, and you can go to somebody and maybe you can get 5 cents extra, which then allows you to spend more money in town, gets the young people back. So I think that'll be what will help us, just that consistent commodity price, and then looking at all your markets all the time, and then the internet speed that allows that. You can send out an email with a lot of market information. If you can't download it, there's no point having it.
Well, look, I think there's a lot from the ag side of it. There's a lot to be positive and look forward with a lot of confidence about. And every day we run into people who have been away, they've come back to the farms, and they're driving those businesses, and they're bringing new ideas, and they're innovating, and they really are leaders, not just in ag, but in the industry generally. But what's going to hold them back is access to technology, and I think the rural and regional communities are probably the ones that could benefit most from the technology that's coming, and probably those that are in the worst position to take up. So we need to turn that around, so that they can really get in and take advantage of it. And the other thing is, there's nothing wrong with, I can see a scenario where in our business, we might be based in Brisbane, I've got an office in Brisbane, I've had someone living out here at Quilpie or living on a property in Western Quilpie somewhere, doing work with us, providing we have that communication right.
There's certainly access to finance for a range of reasons. Long-term finance and succession is what we've been writing as probably the number one requirement. Governments across the board to understand what cost pressures mean and what are the drivers of cost pressures. It's no good refinancing and getting going if 10 years' time your costs have risen a lot more than your income. You're in the same spiral. And then infrastructure like private finance struggles out here to provide finance for infrastructure. There will always be a market failure. Governments have to be involved in infrastructure, whether that's Skymuster or whether it's a bridge over the Cooper or whatever it is. So they're the core factors. And when we have a big flood again, and NDRRA swings into action, let's try and keep the contractors a lot more local and try and keep some of that money in the bush.
Let me ask. I guess for me, sort of come back to, the saying, tough times don't last, tough people do. For me, we need to be constantly assessing where we're at. In Charleville, I guess we do, similarly to Cunnamulla, have a couple of points of difference to Quilpie in that, both of those towns have been identified as 2 of the 5 towns in Queensland most at risk for substance abuse. Those issues significantly impact not only our young people, but our whole communities. And we need to make sure that the resourcing around the social infrastructure and the social and emotional well-being of our communities as a whole are as much on the table as an economic discussion. Otherwise, the outlook is very bleak.
Well, that concludes that part of our discussion. It's now over to you, your turn. So I'm going to hand this microphone around to someone who would like to ask the first question. We have first taken down here. Now, the rule with this is that you say, please stand up, say your name and where you're from, and ask your question.
Okay, so I'm Sandra Tully, and I'm from Ray Station, and I don't know how to sort of say this, but I'm sitting there listening to stuff that really irritates me. But I've been in tourism for 20 years, and I deal with the coach market all across Australia, and I deal with the aviation market. I don't deal with the drive market. So I know a lot about tourism. When I hear Stuart mention about OQTA and Tourism Queensland, I can guarantee you, Stuart, that you have to also look elsewhere. I don't know how many times I've spoken to Tourism Queensland about getting children out here, and unless you've got some driving force more than what I have, it just doesn't happen. And OQTA, well, it's all about whose back you're scratching.
Do you have a specific question to someone?
No, not really. I just want to also say that when it comes to successional planning, a lot of people on rural properties today, we've got 2 sons, one lives in London, but the eldest son is a carpenter. He finds it really hard to get work within this shire. He does a lot of work down at Thugaminga, but he also has to work for us. And I just want to say that a lot of people find that hard to leave their properties because unless they've got another business like our tourism business, and I've got Activewear coming on, they don't have anything else. All their money is tied up in their property. So it's very hard for them to move on. And I don't know. Yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Okay. I'll take that as a comment. Is there anyone on the panel who would like to make a comment in regard to that observation?
Just on that succession planning, the real dead and drought task force policies about that drought and that came up succession planning and the lack of, how difficult it was to get finance. Young people coming up everywhere, right across the state, time and time again. It certainly will be, when that report finally comes out, it certainly will be a big part of that. But, how we fix it, and maybe the bankers again might be able to help, but it's all about, the only way you can, what most people see is to have long-term low interest loans where, and especially tailored for that whole thing with succession planning. So the next generation can come in knowing they've got a 20-year loan at very low interest, and there has to be some governmental intervention, I suppose, in the financial system to allow it to happen.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that with that, we're fine, we've sorted all our stuff out. But I hear it from other people, they can't go because they have nothing else. But for us, we diversified 20 years ago and it's different. That's what I'm saying, diversification is so important. Everybody's got to diversify. We're all working harder and harder, us copies.
And just let everyone across this shire, so many people are diversified in some other area. But wonderful partners, that's so true. Just briefly on the tourism, I spoke briefly about this the other day.
Yeah.
You're right, coaches have been elsewhere with the schools, and that's something that certainly I've been involved in the last couple of years, and there should be some coming out this year, but we can, as I said, it's a whole area of development that we really need to pursue, and it's through the schools, and it's because we can offer what I was talking about before.
Thanks very much, Stuart. I think the next question is editor of Queensland Country Life.
Hi, how you going? I did read somewhere once last year, the number one thing that young mothers want, and it's across the whole of Australia, was a water park. And I would think that Quilpie and Carnival would be a great place for a water slide. That's one question. The next one was, and I would have thought it might come up here today, but solar energy, are there any sort of projects like that across this area or that would come up? Because it seems to me in the north, everywhere we go, that's all those towns talking about Georgetown, the Ashford Shire, all those regions. Is there any interest from any companies out this way?
Is there anyone particular that you want to answer?
Well, it's probably Stuart and Lindsay.
Sure. We might go to Lindsay. Stuart will give you a bit of a breather there.
Well, I'm not going to go into the numbers because we're pretty commercial. We've looked at the numbers, and I guess all I can say is we're not quite there yet. I know there are towns in New South Wales that have had enormous government involvement, and that's what makes it work. But then a lot of renewable energy supplementation that's going on in this country is just not cost effective, especially when you've got today's energy prices. So we've looked at it. The next series of batteries that come online, the lithium battery will probably be the technology that's going to transform because it's all that storage, and that's not effective. And once you do the numbers, I'm not saying no at the moment. It's very difficult unless the government pour in a massive amount of money, and then you really want them to do that. Because it's the countries that have gone down that track, like Spain, if you read it up, they haven't got any great competitive advantage out of doing that.
Stuart, microphone's coming back to you.
Yeah, look, similar position. We had an offer or proposal by geothermal in Quilpie, and we looked at things, but also with the possible improvement in battery technology that we thought solar was something, and that is on the table as such, but nothing's been done about it. It's in the next council, but we may want to look at that. But, yeah.
I'll put it on the record that both of you skillfully ducked the water slide question.
Quilpie's already got a water slide.
Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question? You can just please say your name and where you're from for the benefit of the journalists in the room who might like to take your question down.
Hey, my name's Sue Borders, I'm Gravely retired, semi-retired, which is a joke. Anyway, I'm also president of the Quilpie Cultural Society, and we a new,
Sorry, can you just hold your mic a little bit closer?
a unique setup with, Quilpie Council, who owns the building across the road, and we have workshops. I just want to ask the panel, particularly, is this what we need? We are holding the Quilters Expo in April. We're going to put all the quilts and all the pews in St Matthew's Church, and it's going to be open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday we're going to have them in the Catholic Church, only because it can't be locked. It's going to be open from 10 to 3 p.m. Both the churches are situated all on the street, and the service will be held at Friday at 6 p.m. at St Finbar's and blessing of the quilts. And my idea is starting this off, but I really would like the other towns in the southwest to come on board and make a quilters loop like the one we already have with the National History. I want to expand on this too, and not just quilts, to anything that we've created in the West, in the book, particularly to be on display next year. Just ask, is this what you want? Because I think it is.
Sounds like Quilpie is a close-knit community.
Well, firstly, note to self, if heading back from the Quilpie races and my legs get tired, calling the Catholic Church. My comment would be, to answer your question, do you feel that this is what your cultural scene in Quilpie needs? For me, I'm not from within this community, but I am from within this region. And with Fast Arts, we are focused, we're artist focused. So obviously the councils perform beautifully with the grants that come through for, program, grassroots skill development kind of stuff. Whereas with Fast Arts, we're about creating opportunities for the artists, which is a subtle difference, but it is significant. By all means, I would say use our fabulous network, particularly our social networking networks, to get word out, and contact me for that. In relation to the more specific inquiry, though, I wouldn't dare to answer that because you live here in London, and that's not popping out, but actually that's what it's all about.
I know a lot about quilting. Matter of fact, I probably know more about quilting than anything else, because it goes on in our house around the clock, especially when there's a football match on. There's massive amounts of quilting going on. But it's a big network. These quilters do not take the quilters cheaply because there's an enormous network of quilters. My wife gets on a boat last year and goes right around New Zealand quilting. They quilted their way into all the way around, and it took about 3 or 4 weeks. They quilted their way to Japan. I don't know what's coming this year. So quilting probably keeps the mental health thing happening in a lot of homes, I think. Plus, any backpacker or any worker that comes along, if they don't embrace quilting in the first week, they don't last very long. So it's amazing how much part of our fabric it is.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. Chris.
So, Chris, Queensland Country Life. Davida, I was interested in your comment that we don't approach the young people the right way. I went to our Barcoo Pastoral Society AGM late last year, and there were a few young people there, and a lot of old people, as you could imagine. And they put their hands up for lots of things. But we all just went, phew, thank God. But I was talking to a couple of them just the other day, and they said, that was so scary, we didn't really feel welcome there, and we still don't know if they're doing the right thing. We don't know if we'll come back. And we said, yes, we're really happy, please do it, keep going. But they weren't getting that, something that they need in their language.
Yep, I've probably heard that microphone anyway. Yes, I would agree with you, and I think one of the things, as rural women, we can go to a rural women's conference and have our peers held up as, here's one we prepared earlier, to be inspired, encouraged in our life as a rural woman. But I think there are fabulous young people doing fabulous things, Gen Y and younger, everywhere, you know, and I would cite people like the young man who started Big Help Mob out of Perth, where they basically turn up, work hard, do really unpleasant jobs like clear landfill and prepare sites for building, but they actually do it in their superhero costumes with the band playing and a barbie cooking, because that's the way they roll. Everything is organised by social media, and obviously the internet, again, a problem for that. But if we started to hold some of these young people up and have them come to talk to our young people during Youth Week, fabulous things can happen. Sally, I know Shockwave is also an enormous, you know, something that's just born out of nothing and is rural and remote focused and is run by young people and for young people, and it's regular. And our young people go from childhood to that. My suggestion would be that we could be doing smaller things similarly that suit each community at home, as well as attending some of those things that are in our region.
Thanks very much, Davida. Any more questions? Oh, gentleman down there. You just say your name and you're from.
No, yeah, good day, Lloyd being on the moment, but yeah, right over in Quilpie. I'm just interested in Paul and Lockie's comments earlier. We were talking about collectible co-op, or what you want to call it, and maybe Stuart's been involved in the model for ODB for a long time. So, given that as an individual, then I'll be drought comes along, there'll be nothing bashes with you. Just when you think you're getting going, you're going to supply market, it's all over. So we need that regional diversity and geographic diversity and whatever, all that. So are we too much like individuals that we can't hurt? How's the ODB model, particularly thinking sheep meat, with gardening at this airport in Toowoomba, China's not far away. I'd be interested to hear agribusiness lecturer today on the country. I was talking, he took a number of students, or last year students, they go their final year over to China, and they said the single thing that came out of that trip was they want to know where, why, how it's done, where the food came from, the message. That's what they want. So just interested on your comments.
Yeah, I'll kick off, Boyd. Stuart obviously got a lot of experience with the OB model, and that's sort of shown over a long period of time. I think that it works very well. I don't think, certainly farmers as a group are individuals. I mean, they're very independent, they're minded, and I think that's the environment that you're in. I mean, you have to be sort of understanding your own. But I don't think that stops forming cooperative for special purposes. We're working together on those things with a common need. And again, getting back to the communication issue, I don't see why it has to be regulated, locked into a region. I think it could be pretty broad, getting into the types of commodities you wanted that cooperative to work with. So I'm thinking more, it may well be a single product or single industry, but it could well cross over a lot of industries. So you could then go to your processor or the supermarket chain and say, we've got this range that we can provide to you, and this is what we're going to do. But I think the key thing would be is the commitment to the cooperative. I think that's probably where it would fall down, unless everyone was totally committed to it.
Yeah, you don't know, ODB started up late 90s, 97, something like that. There's three of us originally that got certified organic, and I hadn't been particularly involved in the establishment of that company, and whether it was taking an enormous amount of work. He's successful. He's got a big backer in David Book. He's got 20,000 to 30,000 head, which you need. That's what the first problems I, for years I thought myself with organic wool and was exporting my own wool and whatever for years, but just never had the big enough supply that I could only ever supply one person or one little market. And as Bobby was saying, you getting that commitment, you do it a little bit of hard work, but the potential of it
board is huge, and some really good models. I think, I'm trying to remember, I think King Island is one, and in Tassie too, they do some really good stuff. And the airport and community talking about, the stories, you know, the potential that you hear coming out of there, and they're already starting, actually. They're already starting, like in horticulture and even meat. I think I can do some meat out the other day, do some meat out in China or something. Is very got great potential. But I've always seen it takes very committed people and a lot of hard work to get them going, but certainly it's opportunity.
Yes, question then, thank you.
Thank you. Annabelle Tully, secondary Qld Quilpie here. Thanks very much to Adam and Paul for sharing your, I guess, flexible models of training for young people and encouraging them to get back out to the bush. My question to anyone who'd like to answer it, probably to each of you, what in your industries would you see ways of flexible training and encouragement of getting young people back into the bush for those, particularly for education models, is what I would be interested in, whether that's tertiary level or, for example, in Queensland used to have, you know, we were talking before about how you always had a cousin in the bush. You always had to do a teaching stint in the bush. That was compulsory. That's no longer. You will see people come out to the bush because they want to get their points up so that they can get their choice spot back on the coast. So that's no longer. Yeah, what industries would be able to move on?
Thanks, Annabelle, for the question. Probably don't have time to get an answer from all of you, but I'll take the first volunteer who'd like to answer that question about flexible training models. Peter, you put your hand up first.
Mine's just a brief answer. Annabelle, there is some good stuff happening in small towns across the West, you know, thinking particularly from a high school perspective before they even get to tertiary. Buckhorn, for example, has a great model for training kids at the hostel there in hospitality, so that not only do they gain skills, they also gain qualifications before they leave school. And embracing that not all children are going to, you know, go the OP path. I think without wanting to sort of harp on the withdrawal of mainstream services, for us we do a lot less of it in child assist tapes no longer there. You know, yes, Roma TAFE do a great job. Yes, there's great training partners, but they don't understand the complexities as you come further west. And so particularly we rely on our tradesmen for our young men. I would like to see more flexible stuff happen with tertiary institutions like Reeds came from USQ, and I know they're particularly good and on the front foot.
Probably, yes, I'll go to the gentleman here.
Anthony Glasson, probably south of Targaminda. Just a question probably for Lindsay and Stuart, and it's a bit of a broad one, touched on a few different areas here, about the divide between town and country, or city and country that we were talking about earlier. Peter touched on it with the mental health issue, and the main thing was asked was can it be based out here and we control it, and that didn't happen. The meeting at last springboard I think you're referring to. And a lot of that seems to be happening with grant money coming from state or federal government, but they're telling you exactly how to spend it, or not giving our local governments enough leeway. Or, for example, the drought funding that's around at the moment, $1.5 million this year, around here. I'm under the impression, I don't know for sure, but I'm under the impression that there's strict guidelines where that money can be spent, instead of the local council or government being able to say, well, we think it can be best spent here or here.
Lindsay, for the question.
Well, we've just, it's pretty timely because we've just contracted our 1.5 million to 4 local contractors, but it's all about, there are guidelines, but we were approved for roadworks within our local shire. We did the tender process, we set the criteria for the tender, and local content was really high in the tender point. So it wasn't just about price. You had to stack up all the way through when you put in your tender how you were going to interact with the local economy, right down to where you bought the food for your workers, where your workers came from, where your trucks came from, where they were serviced, all that. That's what got you the points. And so they were pretty much all allocated to local contractors. There were some applicants that didn't read the contract all that well and just put in an application like a normal tender, but it said it's absolutely drought stimulus funding to drought affected communities. So you have to structure your tender that way. So it was all explained. So you can do it. Not everyone's happy because we've had a few that missed out. But it was pretty much their own answer of the question that Paul said. So, yes, I guess is the answer. You can structure the tender so it all stays in there, but I'm not happy my answer won't be loose politically.
Yeah, also, just some of the government red tape sort of referring to, just not with just that money, but with a lot of different things. There's a lot of government red tape that I feel like inside government red tape, which is limiting you guys to being able to make decent decisions about all sorts of different things. Do you think we're going to be able to break that red tape down with state government, or is it just it's there and we've just got to deal with it?
Well, I'm sure they have what we write about this either, but Anastasia Palaszczuk the other day gave us $70 million for Roma Hospital and virtually said on the line that a very large percentage of it's going to be spent with local contractors and local community. So I think there's a change, but what they go at is national competition policy and the fact that price, you get the best price through competition. And we all know you put on the cheapest contractor and he goes broke halfway through the job. And then he puts on the subbies, and we know that they virtually might have left a lot of their gear in the shed because the price that they get screwed down to in the contract means they don't make any money out of it, and then there's no money stays in the community. It's a minefield, but we're on that track, Stuart. We're trying to drive in that. LGAQ are very slow to come to understanding of that issue, and Stuart might have a bit more to say about it.
Yeah, look, as an example, and it is improving, and it's been a lot said, especially in the last 4 years. When I first got this job 4 years ago, we had a $30 million outbound that's been done on main roads for our winter, which we had actually manual work and all the work.
Did you get to allocate where the work was done, or you were told where it was done?
We were in control of the projects, we made control, but of course we all blind for the things they didn't do. But from then on, we've had since then probably another 25, 30 million worth of local roads, which have all gone through council, and it's all gone to 4 local contractors and council as well. And that's something that's changed. So, yeah, I think it's work in progress, but certainly something. And we are, governments are getting a little bit better in that respect. However, there's main roads jobs here. There's 2 having a good show this year, which one of them's been done by Road Tech, main roads company. We're doing the other one, but we love that both. So it's an ongoing aim, but it's probably better.
I would like to take just one more question from the floor. That's it. Yeah, you don't want to ask you a question? Okay. All right, we've got one more down back there. We'll take one more question.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm just interested in Steve Tully's comments about the brew industry as we are now. It's sort of ridiculous that folks are making $5.20 breast and chicken for $3 or $4, and cattle are out of the sky, and kangaroos are 60 cents a kilo. Fellas can't get 100 k's out of town like we do. They just waste time coming in there and shoot 30 for them. So when we go to Buggery and we put the sport and shooters in, we felt that this is another thing that can drive the community. I'm not telling you anything you know about it, but is there anything on the horizon, or are we still swimming and drowning?
I wish I could be all more optimistic, but no, there's nothing on the horizon. Everything to do with the kangaroo industry has been done on a reactive political basis. So there'll never be an industry which was so regulated by red tape and so susceptible to emotion. So why would you invest a lot of money in setting up a supply chain or anything else, and there's no certainty there. Even if a world happened and China opened up and everything was rosy, the kangaroo quota system is set up so that it is deliberately and states openly that it is designed not to affect the number of kangaroos. And so even if they did protect the maximum quota, it still wouldn't have a significant effect. The main effect on kangaroo numbers would still be drought. At the moment, because of animal welfare and the Joey system, 98% of all roos harvested are male. While that happens, as everyone knows in this room, that while that happens, it'll only breed, the female breeding population will get worse. So I really struggle with any hope in that. I've spoken to all the major processors we speak to. I was sitting beside the RSPCA the other day. The RSPCA said, I would love to come out and support the kangaroo industry. We know what happens in a drought and we know all those other issues. But as soon as we do that, our donations drop off immediately. And we cannot support you publicly. We can support you privately, but we cannot support you publicly because our funding dries up immediately from donors. So while we live in that world, I don't know where we're going to go because that world is getting bigger and ours is getting smaller.
Well, thanks, Stephen, and thank you, panellists. That concludes the Grow Queensland Forum here in Quilpie. There's more Grow Queensland forums to come next month, where we're going to South East Queensland and we're in Bow Desert on April 14th. And then we're going to Cloncurry in May, Charters Towers in June, Central Queensland in July, and August going to Blackpool. The Grow Queensland concept could not have been made possible without the support of our principal partners, Rabobank, Elders, Queensland Agricultural Training Colleges, Suzuki and Case IH, and many more supporting partners, some of whom are in the room today. I'd also like to thank the QCL team, including Business Manager John Walters, Editor Penelope Arthur, the Deputy Sally Cripps, who's come from Blackpool today, writer journalist Lucy Ziesema, our Digital Editor Melanie Lewinsky, who's been looking after the live stream back in Toowoomba. Also, QCL Sales Manager Peter Cross, Sales Representative Richard Watts, and the QCL admin team of Sue Cullen and Kristen Tomlin, who come with us today, worked tirelessly behind the scenes back in Brisbane to make this event possible. Please look out for the full report on the Grow Queensland Forum here today in Queensland Country Life on March 17. There'll also be stories starting to filter through from Monday. Editor Penelope Arthur here tells me a very good authority. Those stories will start filtering through onto the Grow Queensland microsite, which you can access via queenslandcountrylife.com.au if you have internet speed that can enable you to do so. And those reports will be filed by Lucy and Sally, who are working here today for us. I'd like to also thank our panel for giving up their time again today. If you could please give them another round of applause for their objectives and their insights and their expertise. I'd also like to thank you for coming along today and bearing with us in this warm room. It's great that we were able to bring some, I'll take credit for it, QCL will take credit for it, because we were able to bring some rain with us here today as well. But thank you for your patience and your attention in this room today. And for those of you who've travelled long distances to be with us, very much appreciated. So thank you. I'd like to give you a little clap as well. And you're all welcome to stay with us and continue the Grow Queensland conversation. So please join us for a drink and a barbecue dinner as well, courtesy of Rabobank. And let's continue the Grow Queensland momentum. Thank you very much.